What would you do if you found a desperate child on a deserted road, begging for something as simple as water, but what you discovered next would shake you to your very core and change two lives forever? This is not just another story. This is about a moment when one person's choice meant the difference between life and death, hope and despair, between a child lost forever and a miracle that no one saw coming. On July 15, 2023, delivery driver Marcus Thompson was driving his usual route through the outskirts of Phoenix, Arizona. The scorching desert sun beat down mercilessly on the asphalt, creating waves of heat that made the horizon shimmer like water. The temperature had reached 118 degrees Fahrenheit, and even with his air conditioning running at full blast, Marcus could feel the oppressive heat seeping through the windows of his delivery van. Marcus had been working for Desert Express Delivery for 3 years. At 34, he was a man who took pride in his work, always ensuring packages reached their destinations on time, no matter how remote or difficult to find. He knew every back road, every shortcut, every hidden neighborhood in the Phoenix metropolitan area. But on this particular day, something was different. Something in the air felt heavy, charged with an energy he couldn't quite identify. The radio in his van crackled with static as he drove down Highway 347, a stretch of road that cuts through some of the most desolate parts of the Sonoran Desert. The nearest gas station was 20 miles behind him, and the next town was still 15 miles ahead. It was the kind of road where cell phone signals came and went, where you could drive for an hour without seeing another soul, where the endless expanse of desert stretched out like an ocean of sand and scrub brush. Marcus wiped the sweat from his forehead and glanced at his delivery schedule. He had 3 more stops before he could head back to the depot, and he was running slightly behind due to a difficult delivery at a ranch house where the elderly owner had insisted on chatting for 20 minutes about his late wife's garden. Marcus didn't mind these conversations usually, but today, for some reason, he felt an urgency to keep moving, as if something important was waiting for him down the road. As he crested a small hill, something caught his eye that made him slow down and squint through the heat-distorted air. At first, he thought it might be a mirage, one of those tricks the desert plays on travelers when the heat becomes unbearable. But as he got closer, his heart began to race with a mixture of disbelief and growing alarm. There, standing on the side of the road in the middle of nowhere, was a small figure. A child. A boy who couldn't have been more than 8 or 9 years old, wearing clothes that were too big for his tiny frame, clothes that looked like they had seen better days. The child was waving frantically at approaching vehicles, but Marcus realized with a sinking feeling that his van was the first vehicle to pass this way in probably hours. Marcus pulled over immediately, his hands shaking slightly as he turned off the engine. The silence that followed was deafening, broken only by the ticking of his cooling engine and the distant cry of a desert hawk circling overhead. He stepped out of the van, and the heat hit him like a physical blow, so intense it took his breath away. If he, a grown man, was struggling with this temperature, what must this child be going through? The boy looked up at Marcus with eyes that seemed far too old for his young face. His skin was flushed red from sun exposure, and Marcus could see the telltale signs of severe dehydration, the dry, cracked lips, the slightly glazed look in his eyes, the way he swayed slightly on his feet as if he might collapse at any moment. "Please, mister," the child said in a voice that was barely above a whisper, hoarse from dehydration and exhaustion. "Do you have any water? I'm so thirsty. I've been walking for I don't know how long." Marcus felt his heart break at the sound of that small, desperate voice. Without hesitation, he rushed back to his van and grabbed the cooler he always kept stocked with ice-cold water bottles for days like this. He opened a bottle and handed it to the child, watching as the boy drank greedily, water spilling down his chin in his desperation to quench his thirst. "Slow down, buddy," Marcus said gently, kneeling down to the child's level. "Drink slowly, or you'll make yourself sick. There's plenty more where that came from." As the child drank, Marcus took in more details that made his stomach clench with worry. The boy's clothes were not just oversized, they were dirty, as if he had been sleeping rough for several nights. His sneakers were falling apart, held together with what looked like duct tape. There were scratches on his arms and legs, the kind you get from walking through brush and thorny desert plants. But most disturbing of all were the bruises Marcus could see peeking out from under the boy's shirt, bruises that looked like they came from human hands. "What's your name, son?" Marcus asked, trying to keep his voice calm and reassuring despite the growing alarm he felt. "Tommy," the boy replied, his voice already stronger after drinking the water. "Tommy Rodriguez." Tommy, what are you doing out here all by yourself? Where are your parents? At the mention of parents, Tommy's face changed. Fear flickered across his features, and he instinctively took a step back from Marcus, as if preparing to run. I can't go back, Tommy said, his voice rising with panic. I can't go back there. They'll hurt me again. They hurt me real bad this time, and I had to run. I had to get away. Marcus felt a chill run down his spine despite the oppressive heat. He had heard stories, seen news reports about child abuse, but he had never been faced with it directly. The realization of what he might be looking at, a child who had run away from home to escape abuse, hit him like a physical blow. Tommy, listen to me, Marcus said, his voice gentle but firm. You're safe now, okay? No one is going to hurt you. But I need to understand what happened. Can you tell me where you came from? How long have you been walking? Tommy looked around nervously, as if expecting someone to appear from behind the desert shrubs. I don't know exactly where I came from. I ran away 3 days ago. Maybe 4. I lost count. I just kept walking during the night when it was cooler, and hiding during the day. But I ran out of the little bit of food I took, and I haven't had water since yesterday morning when I found a little puddle after it rained. 3 or 4 days. Marcus's mind reeled at the implications. This child had been surviving in the desert, one of the most unforgiving environments on Earth, for nearly a week. The fact that he was still alive was nothing short of miraculous. Most adults wouldn't survive more than a day or 2 in these conditions without proper supplies. Tommy, I want you to drink some more water, and then we need to get you to a hospital. You need medical attention, and we need to get you somewhere safe. No. Tommy's reaction was immediate and violent. He backed away from Marcus, his eyes wide with terror. No hospitals. No police. They'll send me back. They'll send me back to him, and he said he'd kill me if I ever told anyone. He said no one would believe me anyway because I'm just a stupid kid. The raw fear in Tommy's voice made Marcus's chest tighten with emotion. Here was a child so terrified of the adults who were supposed to protect him that he would rather risk death in the desert than face the possibility of being returned to his abusers. Marcus made a decision that would change both their lives forever. Instead of insisting on the hospital or calling the authorities immediately, he sat down on the hot asphalt next to Tommy, making himself smaller and less threatening. Tommy, look at me, Marcus said softly. I'm not going to force you to do anything you don't want to do, okay? But you're very sick from the heat and not having enough water. If we don't get you some help soon, you could die out here. And I can't let that happen. I have a daughter about your age, and if she were in trouble like you are, I would want someone to help her. Something in Marcus's voice, the genuine care and concern, seemed to reach Tommy. The boy's rigid posture relaxed slightly, though he remained ready to bolt at the first sign of betrayal. You have a daughter? Tommy asked, his voice small. I do. Her name is Sarah, and she's 7 years old. She loves dinosaurs and pizza and terrible jokes that make me groan but laugh at the same time. She's the light of my life, and I would do anything to protect her, just like I want to protect you right now. Tommy was quiet for a long moment, studying Marcus's face as if trying to determine whether he could be trusted. Finally, he spoke again. The man who hurt me, he's not my real dad. My real parents died in a car crash when I was 5. I went to live with my mom's brother, Uncle Ray, but he drinks a lot, and when he drinks, he gets really angry. He hits me and says it's my fault my parents died, that I'm cursed and I ruin everything I touch. Marcus felt tears prick at his eyes as he listened to Tommy's story. The casual way the child described such horrific abuse spoke to how normalized this treatment had become in his young life. He got really drunk 3 nights ago, angrier than I'd ever seen him. He said he was tired of looking at my face, that I reminded him too much of my mom, and that maybe he should just get rid of me once and for all. He started hitting me with his belt, but not just regular hitting. He was trying to really hurt me, maybe even kill me. So I waited until he passed out, and I took what little money I could find and some crackers, and I ran. Tommy, what you did was incredibly brave, Marcus said, his voice thick with emotion. You saved your own life by running away. But now we need to make sure you stay safe, and that means we need to get some adults involved who can help protect you properly. But what if they don't believe me? What if they send me back to Uncle Ray? Marcus thought carefully before responding. He knew that the Child Protective Services system wasn't perfect, that sometimes children did fall through the cracks. But he also knew that Tommy would die if he stayed in the desert much longer, and that Marcus couldn't just walk away and leave this child to fend for himself. Tommy, I'm going to make you a promise right now, and I want you to listen carefully. I promise that I will not let anyone send you back to a place where you'll be hurt. I promise that I will stay with you and make sure you're safe until we find people who will protect you properly. I know it's scary to trust a stranger, but sometimes strangers are the only ones who can help us when our own families have failed us. Tommy stared at Marcus for a long moment, and Marcus could see the internal struggle playing out on the child's face. The desire to trust warring with the learned fear of adults who had promised to care for him but had instead caused him pain. Finally, Tommy nodded slowly. Okay. But you have to promise you'll stay with me. Don't leave me alone with people I don't know. I promise, Marcus said solemnly. Now, let's get you into the van where there's air conditioning, and let's get some more fluids into you. Then we'll figure out our next step together. As they drove toward the nearest town, Marcus called his supervisor to explain that he had encountered an emergency and would need to abandon his remaining deliveries for the day. His supervisor, a gruff man named Bill who had worked in delivery for over 20 years, surprised Marcus by immediately agreeing and telling him to take whatever time he needed. You did the right thing, Marcus, Bill said over the phone. That kid is lucky you found him. Most people would have just called 911 and driven away, leaving it for someone else to handle. But Marcus knew he couldn't have done anything differently. From the moment he saw Tommy standing on that desolate road, there had been no question in his mind that he would do whatever it took to help this child. At the small rural hospital in the town of Maricopa, Marcus stayed true to his promise. He remained by Tommy's side as the medical staff examined him, advocating for the boy when he became frightened or overwhelmed. The doctors confirmed what Marcus had suspected. Tommy was severely dehydrated and suffering from heat exhaustion. A few more hours in the desert sun, and he might not have survived. As Tommy received 4 fluids and began to recover physically, Marcus made the difficult phone call to Child Protective Services. He explained the situation carefully, emphasizing Tommy's terror of being returned to his uncle and the clear evidence of abuse. The social worker who responded, a kind woman named Maria Santos, seemed genuinely concerned about Tommy's welfare and assured Marcus that Tommy would not be returned to any unsafe environment. But as the hours passed and Tommy grew stronger, a new problem emerged. The foster care system in Arizona was overwhelmed, and there were no immediate placements available for Tommy. The temporary options were either a group home with a reputation for being understaffed and chaotic, or a return to emergency custody until a proper foster family could be found. Tommy, who had been growing more comfortable with Marcus throughout the day, became distraught when he learned that Marcus would have to leave him with strangers. You promised, Tommy said, tears streaming down his face. You promised you wouldn't leave me alone with people I don't know. Marcus felt like his heart was being torn in two. He had made a promise to this child, but he was just a delivery driver. He wasn't trained in childcare, wasn't approved as a foster parent, wasn't equipped to take responsibility for a traumatized child's well-being. But as he looked at Tommy's tear-stained face, Marcus made another decision that would change everything. He asked to speak privately with Maria Santos, the social worker. What would it take for me to become an emergency foster placement for Tommy? He asked. Maria looked surprised. Well, there would need to be background checks, home inspections, interviews, training sessions. Normally the process takes months, but in emergency situations, we can expedite some of the requirements. Are you seriously considering this? I am, Marcus said without hesitation. This child has been through enough. He trusted me when he couldn't trust anyone else, and I'm not going to abandon that trust now. Over the next several hours, as Tommy slept in his hospital bed, Marcus made phone calls that would reshape his entire life. He called his ex-wife, Sarah's mother, to explain the situation and ask if she would support his decision to take in Tommy temporarily. Despite their divorce, they had maintained a good relationship, and she immediately agreed to help however she could. He called his parents, his siblings, his closest friends, building a support network for both himself and Tommy. He contacted his landlord about adding Tommy to his lease, researched schools in his district, and began the process of becoming an emergency foster parent. Most importantly, he sat down with his 7-year-old daughter Sarah when she came to visit him at the hospital, explaining in age-appropriate terms that he had found a little boy who needed help and might be staying with them for a while. Sarah, with the uncomplicated kindness of childhood, simply asked, "Is he nice? Does he like dinosaurs?" When Tommy woke up from his much-needed sleep and Marcus told him about the plan, the boy's reaction was overwhelming. For the first time since Marcus had found him, Tommy truly smiled, a radiant expression that transformed his entire face. "You would really do that for me?" Tommy asked in wonder. "Tommy, families aren't just about blood relations," Marcus said gently. "Sometimes families are made from the people who choose to love and protect each other. And I choose to protect you, for as long as you need me to." The legal processes moved surprisingly quickly, helped by the clear evidence of Tommy's abuse and the urgency of his situation. Within a week, Marcus had been approved as Tommy's emergency foster parent, with the possibility of the arrangement becoming permanent if both Tommy and Marcus wanted it to continue. The transition wasn't easy. Tommy struggled with nightmares, anxiety, and a deep-seated fear that this new stability would be taken away from him. He hoarded food in his bedroom, convinced that he might suddenly find himself hungry and alone again. He flinched at sudden movements and loud noises, legacy responses from months of abuse. But with patience, consistency, and the help of a skilled therapist who specialized in childhood trauma, Tommy began to heal. Marcus learned about trauma-informed parenting, attended counseling sessions, and connected with support groups for foster parents. Slowly, day by day, Tommy began to trust that this new life was real and permanent. He started sleeping through the night without nightmares. He stopped hoarding food when he realized that meals would always be provided. He began to laugh at Marcus's terrible dad jokes and Sarah's silly dinosaur facts. The most profound moment came 3 months after Marcus found Tommy on that desert road. They were sitting together on the couch, watching a movie, when Tommy suddenly looked up at Marcus and said, "I love you, Dad." Marcus felt tears stream down his face as he hugged Tommy close. "I love you too, son. More than you'll ever know." The formal adoption was finalized 8 months later. Tommy Rodriguez became Tommy Thompson, officially and legally part of Marcus's family. At the adoption hearing, the judge commended Marcus for his extraordinary compassion and commitment, noting that Tommy's transformation from a traumatized, frightened child to a thriving, confident boy was a testament to the healing power of unconditional love. But the story doesn't end there. Tommy's experience had a ripple effect that extended far beyond his own healing. Marcus began volunteering with organizations that help trafficked and abused children, sharing Tommy's story and advocating for better support systems for kids in crisis. Tommy himself, as he grew older and processed his experiences in therapy, expressed a desire to help other children who had faced similar trauma. He began speaking at schools and community events about the importance of reporting abuse and seeking help, his own survival serving as powerful testimony to the resilience of the human spirit. The delivery route where Marcus found Tommy became something of a pilgrimage site for him. Once a month, he would drive that same stretch of Highway 347, sometimes with Tommy, sometimes alone, reflecting on the moment that changed both their lives forever. They would stop at the exact spot where Tommy had stood that day, now marked by a small roadside memorial that Marcus had placed there, a simple stone marker that read, "Here, hope was found." Tommy grew into a remarkable young man, excelling in school, making friends easily, and displaying a compassion for others that clearly stemmed from his own experiences with suffering and rescue. He never forgot where he came from, but he also never let his past define his future. Years later, when Tommy was in high school, he wrote an essay for his English class about heroism. In it, he wrote, "People think heroes are people who wear capes or have superpowers. But real heroes are people who see someone in need and choose to help, even when it's inconvenient, even when it changes their whole life. My dad is a hero because he saw a scared kid on the side of the road and decided that kid mattered more than his delivery schedule. He taught me that families aren't born, they're chosen, and that love isn't something you deserve or earn, it's something you give freely because that's what makes us human." The essay won the state competition for high school writing, and Tommy read it aloud at the award ceremony with Marcus sitting proudly in the front row, tears streaming down his face as he listened to his son articulate the philosophy that had guided their family from that first day on the desert highway. Tommy's Uncle Ray was eventually prosecuted for child abuse, based on Tommy's testimony and medical evidence of his injuries. He was sentenced to 5 years in prison and permanently barred from having contact with Tommy. Tommy felt no satisfaction from his uncle's punishment, but he did feel a sense of closure, knowing that Ray would not be able to hurt other children. As Tommy approached his 18th birthday, many people expected him to age out of the foster system and become independent. But for Marcus and Tommy, there was never any question that their family bond was permanent and unbreakable. Tommy took Marcus's last name not because the law required it, but because he wanted to honor the man who had saved his life and given him a future. On the 5th anniversary of the day Marcus found Tommy on Highway 347, they returned to that spot together for a special ceremony. Tommy, now 13 years old and confident in ways that seemed impossible for the terrified 8-year-old Marcus had first encountered, placed flowers at the memorial stone. "Thank you," Tommy said quietly, speaking to the desert air, to the universe, to whatever force had brought Marcus down that particular road at that particular moment. "Thank you for sending me a dad when I needed one most." Marcus put his arm around his son's shoulders, both of them looking out at the endless expanse of desert that had once been a place of desperation and fear but had become, instead, the birthplace of their family. The story of Marcus and Tommy became widely known in their community and beyond. Local news stations covered their journey, and eventually, their story was featured in national media as an example of the extraordinary power of ordinary people to change lives through simple acts of compassion. But for Marcus and Tommy, the attention was never the point. The point was the daily miracle of their life together. Breakfast conversations and homework help, birthday parties and bedtime stories, the thousand small moments that make up a family's shared history. Tommy never forgot the feeling of standing on that desert road, desperate and alone, watching cars pass by without stopping. It made him acutely aware of other people's isolation and need, and he made it his mission to ensure that no one in his life ever felt abandoned the way he once had. In high school, Tommy started a peer support group for students who were dealing with family problems or abuse. He worked with school counselors to create a safe space where kids could share their experiences and get help without fear of judgment or retaliation. The program was so successful that it was adopted by schools throughout the district. Marcus continued his work as a delivery driver, but his perspective on the job had changed completely. He no longer saw it as simply moving packages from one place to another. Instead, he understood that his routes took him through communities where people might be struggling, where someone might need help, where the next Tommy might be waiting for a stranger to care enough to stop. He began carrying extra supplies in his van: water bottles, energy bars, blankets, a first aid kit. His co-workers teased him about being over-prepared, but Marcus didn't care. He had learned that you never know when you might encounter someone in desperate need, and he wanted to be ready. Over the years, Marcus did find other people who needed help along his delivery routes. An elderly woman whose car had broken down in extreme heat. A homeless veteran who was struggling with mental health issues. A young mother whose abusive boyfriend had kicked her out of the house with her baby. In each case, Marcus stopped, offered help, and connected them with appropriate resources. None of these encounters were as dramatic or life-changing as finding Tommy, but each one reinforced Marcus's belief that we all have a responsibility to care for one another, especially those who are most vulnerable. Tommy's healing journey wasn't always smooth or linear. There were setbacks and difficult days, times when the trauma of his early years surfaced in unexpected ways. But with Marcus's unwavering support and professional counseling, Tommy learned healthy ways to process his experiences and use them as a source of strength rather than shame. By the time Tommy graduated from high school as valedictorian, he had transformed from a frightened, abused child into a confident young man with plans to study social work in college. His graduation speech moved the entire audience to tears as he talked about the power of second chances and the importance of never giving up on anyone, no matter how broken they might seem. 5 years ago, I was dying in the desert, convinced that my life had no value and that no one would ever care about what happened to me, Tommy said from the podium, his voice strong and clear. Today, I stand before you as proof that one person's compassion can change everything. My father saw me at my worst moment and chose to love me anyway. He taught me that families are made of choice, not chance, and that every person has infinite worth and potential. Marcus sat in the audience, overwhelmed with pride and love for the remarkable young man Tommy had become. The scared, traumatized child from the desert seemed like a distant memory, replaced by this confident, articulate, compassionate person who was ready to take on the world. As Tommy headed off to college, he and Marcus maintained their close relationship. They talked every day, visited frequently, and continued their annual pilgrimage to the memorial stone on Highway 347. Tommy studied social work with a specialization in child welfare, determined to work within the system to protect other children who found themselves in situations like his own. The bond between Marcus and Tommy became a model for other foster and adoptive families in their community. They spoke at training sessions for prospective foster parents, sharing their story and offering practical advice about building trust with traumatized children. Their message was always the same: love is not enough by itself. Children who have experienced trauma need patience, consistency, professional support, and adults who are willing to educate themselves about the effects of abuse and neglect. But when love is combined with knowledge, commitment, and unwavering support, miraculous transformations are possible. Today, more than a decade after that life-changing encounter on Highway 347, Tommy is a licensed social worker specializing in child protective services. He works directly with children who have experienced abuse and neglect, helping them navigate the system and find safe, loving homes. Marcus is now a supervisor at the delivery company, but he still takes time to drive routes himself, especially through areas where vulnerable people might need help. He has officially adopted 3 more children over the years, all of whom came to him through his work with child welfare organizations. The Thompson family home is a place of healing and hope, where children who have experienced the worst of humanity learn to trust in the best of it. Family dinners are loud and chaotic affairs, filled with laughter and storytelling, homework help and gentle guidance. But every month, without fail, the entire family makes the trip to that memorial stone on Highway 347. It's become a family tradition, a reminder of where their journey began and how far they've all come. Standing there in the desert, surrounded by the family he chose and who chose him back, Tommy often reflects on the mysterious workings of fate that brought Marcus down that particular road on that particular day. A few minutes earlier or later, a different route chosen, and their paths never would have crossed. But they did cross, in a moment of desperate need and extraordinary compassion, proving that sometimes the most powerful force in the universe is simply one person's decision to care about the welfare of another human being, especially when that human being is small, scared, and standing alone on a desert highway, asking for nothing more than a drink of water and finding, instead, a father and a future he never dared to dream possible. This story reminds us that heroism isn't about grand gestures or superhuman abilities. It's about seeing someone in need and choosing to help, even when it's inconvenient, even when it changes your life forever. It's about understanding that every person we encounter has a story, a struggle, and an infinite capacity for transformation when shown genuine love and compassion. In a world that can often feel cold and indifferent, the story of Marcus and Tommy stands as a beacon of hope, proving that families can be formed through choice rather than blood, that healing is possible even after the deepest trauma, and that sometimes the most important delivery a person can make is delivering hope to someone who has lost all reason to believe that anyone cares whether they live or die. So the next time you're driving down a lonely road and you see someone who looks like they might need help, remember Tommy and Marcus. Remember that stopping might be the inconvenient thing to do, but it might also be the most important thing you ever do. Because you never know when that person standing by the roadside might be waiting for exactly the kind of help only you can provide, at exactly the moment when they need it most. If this story touched your heart, please subscribe to our channel for more incredible true stories about the power of human compassion and the extraordinary things that happen when ordinary people choose to be heroes. Share this video with someone who needs to be reminded that there are still good people in the world, people who will stop when they see someone in need, people who understand that we all have a responsibility to take care of each other. And remember, you have the power to be someone's Marcus. You have the ability to see past someone's circumstances to their infinite human worth. You can choose to stop, to help, to care, and in doing so, you might just save a life and change the world, one act of compassion at a time.